When have you seen a tornado do this in Minnesota? More than 2,000 homes and businesses damaged or destroyed in St. Peter alone. Other towns are devastated as well. But college students escaped destruction of their dorms at Gustavus Adolphus, and other people survived being buried alive. We have live team coverage of the Spring Twisters. A special one-hour WCCO4 News starts right now. Twisters beginning with our own Don Shelby, who is live in St. Peter. Don?
Amelia, it is really something to see, and even more amazing is that there was only one death in all of this. When you see the number of homes destroyed here, the number of businesses destroyed here, and how badly they were hit, it is amazing to believe that not everyone would have been killed in this storm that left a path 3/4 to a mile wide right through the west bank of the Minnesota River right here in St. Peter. We're standing here at what used to be the public school. It was turned into a community center not long ago. The wall was standing right here, was a 4-course brick wall. It has been blown in onto the gymnasium floor. On the other side of that, where the wall collapsed, a man was buried alive. We'll tell you his story just a little bit later in the newscast. Now, here's the timeline according to the National Weather Service for how those storms hit. Tornadoes touched down in Comfrey at 4:40 in the evening. By 5:50, they had already gotten into St. Peter. Then they went on by 6 o'clock to Lee Center. They kept right on going, twisting on through Lonsdale at about 6:20. Now, we already gave you the numbers, but the pictures bring home the most impact. Captain Dale Dobish in the Live Eye in the Sky helicopter recorded what is left of a lot of these St. Peter neighborhoods. He also flew over what is left of a rural feedlot operation, a damaged farmhouse surrounded by the foundations of farm buildings, and lumber that seems to be nothing but matchsticks. A lot of people are saying that that this was a tornado, the size of which no one has ever seen before. Photos from the air distinctly show a path 3/4 to a mile wide through the city of St. Peter. We don't know if that's how wide the tornado was or whether there were 2 or 3 tornadoes. No one knows exactly for sure yet.
Ladies and gentlemen, our host for tonight, veteran news anchor from WCCO Television, Don Shelby.
Thank you very much. It's so good to be back. It is such an honor to be asked back. I would like to be able to say that I am some kind of seasoned journalist, steely-eyed, and can stand in the midst of terrible tragedy and be untouched by it. But that was not the case in St. Peter 20 years ago. I was touched by nearly everything I saw. I was touched by the people. I was touched by the horrible destruction. Because I'm a small-town country boy myself. And everybody I saw reminded me of people in my own home. And my sadness was so deep about what happened here. Not only the loss of the great buildings, the loss of life, the loss of pets, the loss of homes, the loss of garages, the loss of cars, the loss of 17,000 trees. It just struck so deep into me that I was almost unable to go on. And it hit all of us at CCO. It hit us all. And it sort of covered the way everyone felt during that period of time that we were reporting on this story. And there were questions. Would the town ever recover? But in the back of my mind somewhere, having met so many people who worked so hard to make St. Peter what a wonderful community it was, that it was not going to go away, that everybody was going to work to make sure it lasted, stayed, prospered. And so 20 years later, here we are. I got gray hair. Now, I don't have gray hair, I have white hair. I want to tell you 2 stories. One, and you may hear me say something on the 10 o'clock tonight about this, and I said something earlier on the 9 at CCO this morning. First time I've been back in 8 years. But they had me on because they said apparently there's some reason you're going to St. Peter. And yeah, it's a kind of an important reason. Todd Prafke told me this story. And it is the metaphor for why you survived. So he was sitting in his office and he was handling everything. He was handling all of the people who were asking, trying to get the federal aid down, trying to get the state aid down, trying to get the $10 million down, trying to get all of the emergency services up and trying to get the electricity back going, trying to get the schools back running. And a woman walked into his office and she was clutching 3 books to her chest. And she said, "I need help." And Todd said, "How may I help you, ma'am?" And she said, "I checked these books out of the library last week and they're good." And this was the genius of Todd Prafke. He said, "Do you know what, madam? I'm going to make it your responsibility to hold those books in safety because we're going to build a new library and then you can return them." We've got kind of an interesting program for you tonight. I think you're going to enjoy what you see. And we're going to work toward a certain end where we're going to pause in the middle of this program. And so I want you to, I'm going to check my little clock here because we've got it set on atomic time. 5:29 is exactly when the tornado hit, even though the National Weather Service in the earliest report said 5:40. 5:29 is when it hit. That's what the clock on Old Main stopped right at 5:29. You know, and following the tornado, the Kiwanis Club and their members gathered stories, and they published 2 editions of a book called Twist of Fate. And I'd like to share by reading to you a few excerpts from there. And the photos you see up on the screen don't necessarily comport with what we're talking about, but they're photos that were taken contemporaneously. Amy Philippek was communications technician, St. Peter Police Department. She said, "At approximately 5:14 p.m., the patrol sergeant requested that I set off the sirens again just to let people know that the warning was still in effect. They were set off twice again. At 5:27, an officer advised over the radio that he was 2 or 3 miles southwest of the city and that the tornado was over him. At this point, I started setting off the sirens continually. They continued to sound until they were destroyed by the storm. There was lots of chaos. After the storm hit, the city was divided up into quadrants and the teams were established for search and rescue. Since it was dark by that point in the city, out of electricity, fire trucks were sent with teams for lighting. Streets were clogged with trees and debris, so backhoes and other heavy equipment were sent in with the teams to clear the streets." Ruth Carter said, "We got under the steps and hung onto the door jamb of the bathroom, shaking like a leaf, repeating, 'Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.' The wind started picking up and the train noise began, and the wind stopped and we came upstairs. My garage by the house lost its roof. It flew across the street to my neighbor's front door. The house lost part of its roof and the siding and the windows. The east wall blew out 6 to 8 inches. I lost my house of 45 years, but my prayers go out to the families who lost loved ones." Gary Vollmer shared, "I was coming back to Nicollet from a fishing trip to South Dakota. The storms were chasing us the whole way. The county behind us all across southern Minnesota. I headed to Nicollet on Highway 25, figuring I could go around it. I came over the hill and it was right there, the huge swirling mass of dirt and debris. When the mud started hitting the windshield, I knew I couldn't make it, so I bailed out of the truck and dove into the ditch. It was just in time because I lay in the ditch. I saw a farm explode right in front of me. As I was being battered by the debris flying through the air, I saw the wind spin my truck around, pick it up, and set it back down in the ditch facing the opposite way. When it was all over, I was picking up my fishing gear that had been scattered around by the tornado, when I spotted my bag of walleyes in the field. Of course, you don't leave a bag of walleyes. So I walked out into the middle of the field and I retrieved them. Bruce Gray and his wife, Sue, it looked to me as though it was 1.5 miles wide, one black wall of debris and hail headed our way. I turned to run, closing each door behind me and telling Sue to get the Cocker Spaniel and retreat as far as she could away from the windows and get into the room behind the garage. We got under the table as far as the storm we could go to listen to KRBI, and within seconds KRBI was off the air. The wind was ravaging our home. We could hear glass break, doors give way, rafters crack and break, the roof lift off part of our building. It sounded like a large freight train coming through our home. At that point, Sue and I said goodbye to each other, and we thanked each other for the 42 years we'd been together. We then held each other and our dog and began to pray. We thought our lives were ending. Our ears popped, and the feeling that we were going to be sucked out of the room began, and just as quickly as it started, it ended. And there we were under the debris on the floor, thinking there was more to come. The entire Pine Point area was destroyed, including 16 townhomes and 6 private homes. Paul Lawson said, I was working in my office at the Carlson Administration Building on the campus of Gustavus Adolphus. Another co-worker, Lori Dietrich, and I rode out the storm in the men's restroom. I peeked out in an area where a glass window had been, looking over the front of the campus. I could not believe my eyes. Literally, no mature trees were left standing on the hill in front of the campus. Now, I'll add one more story. As a reporter for WCCO, and perhaps you were watching during this period of time, just 10 months prior to the tornado that hit St. Peter, the WCCO TV crew was in East Grand Forks and Grand Forks, North Dakota for the 1997 flood. And during that period of time, we watched the largest evacuation of an American city. It was only beaten by the evacuation caused by Katrina. Now, when I came out here a moment ago, I told you about hard-bitten journalists who, for a living, cover tragedy and death and destruction, and that you become hardened and inured to that kind of terrible human event. But one of the things that struck me during that period of time, when we were here, when I watched grown reporters of 20 and 30 years experience break down in tears, when we saw a team of emergency workers coming into St. Peter from East Grand Forks, Minnesota, to help this community rebuild when theirs was still in trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this moment to listen to the bells chime, because in 2 seconds, it will be 5:29 p.m. May we have a moment of silence. We remember 2 lives were lost in the storms of the day. Louis Moseden of Lake Hanska Township, he died the next day from injuries in the tornado that hit Comfrey. And Dustin Schneider of St. Peter. And we recognize Dustin's parents, Steve and Diana, who are with us tonight. Would you please stand? Now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you a person you know very, very well. Since arriving in the United States Senate, Amy Klobuchar has earned the reputation as an effective, results-driven legislator willing to reach across the aisle to get things done. From tornadoes to floods to fires, Senator Klobuchar has traveled throughout Minnesota and seen the resiliency of our communities when responding to disasters. She has been a supporter of securing critical funding for recovery efforts around the state. Senator Klobuchar has been a vocal advocate for rural Minnesota, fighting for farmers and rural communities from her seat on the Agriculture Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you the people of St. Peter, Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Don. I think, come on, don't you think he looks even better 20 years later? That's what I think. The mayor, it's been so lovely to sit with him and his wife. Steve and Diana, I'm so sorry for your loss. What a lovely child. And all of you, this resilient community that are gathered here today, Gustavus alums and students. I see your president there of Gustavus. Becky, thank you for being here. And then also, just to see these stories and remember what happened. Now, I was here on a little more of a celebratory occasion, and that was the opening of this tremendous high school, which I just loved. I loved it so much that I decided I liked some of the chairs in the cafeteria and upstairs, and I tried to look for them for this new little 700 square foot apartment we got in Washington. And as my husband noted, those chairs are only for high school cafeterias, and you can't order them individually, but that's how much I enjoyed the visit. And my husband is from nearby, from Mankato, so I've spent a lot of time hearing St. Peter stories from him and a lot of time in this great community. I think everyone here remembers where they were at that moment exactly 20 years ago, and no one will ever forget the devastation, the 14 tornadoes, the lost lives, 2/3 of the buildings damaged in the town, every single building in Gustavus, 200 homes totally destroyed, another 400 damaged to the point where they couldn't be lived in. But what stays with us, as Don has so well articulated, even more than all those statistics, are the stories. Because what I remember back then is that people were saying, will St. Peter even continue? Does anyone remember that? And is Gustavus going to be able to come back? Well, you showed them. You think of what you went through. The students at Gustavus coming out of their shelters to find that not only had this chapel steel ripped off, but the steel's cross had been hurled to the other side of campus. I remember those photos. Or the family that had the top of their home destroyed and eventually had to demolish the rest of it. Their little girl would call the local weatherman daily, asking in fear what kind of clouds were out that day. Or the 3 books returned to the library that didn't exist, or that bag of walleye. 20 years ago, this community and the families that live here were shaken to the core. And that happens to people, and that happens all over the place every day in America. But the real question becomes, after everyone is gone and the cameras are off, what do you do about it? And boy, did this community respond. Your strength came from the sense of community, your belief that you had a responsibility to come together and lift one another up. Your local leaders took action, organizing efforts to rescue survivors, to rebuild. Some of the leaders I know, I personally know, former Rep. Ruth Johnson at the time, former Senator John Hottinger, who were instrumental in getting funding assistance, the governor. Then you have people that are no longer with us, former Mayor Jerry Habacher, former Chamber of Commerce Director Larry Haugen, former School Superintendent Gil Carlson. everyone came together. Those first responders, the staff and volunteers working to salvage whatever books remained from the library, Lutheran pastors, this was one of my favorite stories, whose church had survived the storm, invited Roman Catholics whose church had not to worship at First Lutheran. Pretty good story. My in-laws are Catholic, so that was the story that they told me. Neighbors took in those without a home and fed them warm meals, or even just helped out with loads of laundry. You never gave up. 20 years ago, federal funding, over $30 million in aid to local communities in the area, over 50 housing units, helped over 500 families and businesses here in St. Peter receive assistance, the state funding, everyone came together. But mostly it was that spirit. It reminds me when Don referenced East Grand Forks of being up at the Fargo floods. And if you remember, those were very close to destroying Moorhead and Fargo. And I was on, of course, the Moorhead side at a volunteer place. And this guy was giving out sandwiches. And I said, oh, thanks for volunteering. And he said, well, I didn't have anywhere else to go. And I said, why? And he said, I lost my house, so I thought I'd come here and help. That's that spirit. If you don't have anything yourself, you'll give whatever you have left to someone else. I think your city administrator, Todd, who had just started his job a few months before the tornado hit, can you imagine that? New job. I think that Todd put it best. He said, whenever you have an event like that, whether it is a tornado or a flood or a fire, you have to decide whether you're going to pick yourself back up. You either do or you don't, and St. Peter did. 20 years later, this is a brand new city. Where a church was destroyed, now stands a community center and a library. The hospital was renovated and affordable housing options were built. When the mayor pointed up at the screen to that field that was destroyed, he said, that's where the school is right now. And that is what we take from all of this. And that is that you could have just stayed beaten down, but you didn't. At a time in our politics and our government where people are so polarized and are mourning the loss of community, you are a symbol of resilience. You didn't mourn, you rebuilt. So thank you, not only for giving us this beautiful town, but for reminding us what community really means. This is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar. Now I'd like to introduce someone you know well. He was elected in 2015 and is currently serving his second term as mayor. Mayor Chuck Zeman has lived in St. Peter for more than 40 years. I would like to introduce him now for his remarks and some proclamations. Mayor Zeman.
Good afternoon. Quite an honor to be here, especially with Mr. Shelby. I remember as a little boy, not much more than a couple years old, sitting on my dad's knee watching Don on TV. Anyway, I would like to read a couple of, like Don said, first is a letter from Senator Smith, and she says, "Dear friends, I am sorry I cannot be with you today to reflect and commemorate the tornado of March 29th, 1998. I send my heartfelt thoughts to the entire St. Peter community. The community of St. Peter has worked tirelessly to rebuild and grow after this tragedy. During this time of reflection, we honor the losses and also celebrate the resilience of the community in moving forward and creating new opportunities. Over the last 20 years, St. Peter has shown leadership, creativity, and perseverance to embrace the changes that were necessary to thrive. Again, thank you for taking time to remember how this event changed St. Peter and how all of you rose to help build a stronger, more vibrant community. I am honored to serve you and proud of your determination and perseverance. Sincerely, Tina Smith, United States Senator. I also have a proclamation from Governor Dayton, and it says, whereas on March 29th, 1998, the city of St. Peter was among several communities impacted by one of the worst storms in Minnesota history. And whereas we remember the loss of life and extreme damage caused by this storm and celebrate the resilience of a community that came together in healing. And whereas the Minnesota spirit of service was demonstrated by the outpouring of support for the cleanup following the storm, and whereas community leaders forged new partnerships and innovative solutions related to the rebuilding, and whereas the recovery of the St. Peter community remains a leading example to other communities about how to overcome a natural disaster, and whereas St. Peter has overcome this disaster and is a growing and thriving community. Whereas we pause today to remember this moment in Minnesota history and honor the progress that the St. Peter community has made during the last 20 years. Now therefore, I, Mark Dayton, Governor of Minnesota, do hereby proclaim Thursday, March 29th, 2018, as the 20th anniversary of the St. Peter tornado in the state of Minnesota. Signed, Mark Dayton, Governor. I want to thank Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith and Governor Dayton for their recognition and their very kind words. They were heartfelt, and I think everyone appreciates it very much. I also would like to note that today, March 29th, is Vietnam Veterans Day. The lives of 58,220 American military women and men were lost during the Vietnam War. And the reason I bring this up today is it includes 7 who attended St. Peter High School. They are Frederick Brenke, age 18, Harvey Enns, age 20, Mel Lurth, Jr., age 23, Mike McClellan, age 23, Dwight Tollefson, age 19, Rick Wise, age 19, and Steve Weddergren, age 20. These patriots gave their lives so that we may gather here today in freedom and enjoy the liberties we have been granted by their sacrifice. Please remember the Gold Star families of our fallen heroes in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Now we're going to move into a section called The Story of Us Recovery, a series of video interviews that have already been recorded. Tonight is a time for remembering and storytelling, and certainly as we were gathering outside where a lot of the people who wanted to be inside tonight are listening to us, storytelling was what was going on. Everyone had a story. Everyone knew what they were doing. Everyone knew what had been lost, and everyone now knows what has been gained. The planning team selected 6 people to share their story on video. These 6 people were chosen either because they are representative of many of the stories of recovery and rebuilding. The first one is from Aero Ace Hardware. Dave Nyman has been the owner of Aero Ace Hardware in St. Peter since 1985. Like many businesses in town, Aero Ace Hardware was badly damaged, yet found a way to rebuild their own building and continue to serve the entire community during recovery. The night of the storm, the store was closed, but Dave was there and he was working. You will hear it wasn't long before people started coming to the store for help.
When I came upstairs, we had quite a bit of damage to the store. As I tried to walk down the aisles, there was merchandise all over in the aisles. And so I actually went and grabbed a snow shovel to clear a path for me to walk, because I was walking on top of light bulbs and everything else. Of course, they were breaking, but there was no aisles. It was all covered with merchandise, and all the pegboard hooks had fiberglass insulation on them, because as the front windows blew out and then the back of the building came down, the wind went right through the building during the tornado. You know, things just started to happen in rapid fire. And I felt like I had to make 2 years worth of decisions within 2 weeks. You know, in something like this, a hardware store is pretty important. It has a lot of the supplies that you need. And so we were just rapid fire trying to get supplies from anywhere we could. Batteries would be one example that, again, 2-3 years worth of battery sales we did in 1 week's time, because everybody needed them, you know, because it was dark for several days with no electricity. I was there at the store watching over the store, and then people started coming up and asking about getting flashlights or batteries or some different things, and I was getting enough of that I ended up going into the store and getting all of the flashlights and batteries that I could and bringing it up to the window. And then I just started handing them out to people, and I would have people say, well, how much do I owe you? And I said, well, today we're not taking money. It says, what do you need? And just take what you need, and then if you want to come back later, you can come back later and pay me for it. But today we just got to get you going, you know, get everybody going. So that's what we did. And it was interesting, the different people's responses, because there was a lot of different ones. Some were just kind of like okay with it. Some were very somber. Some were feeling very guilty that they hadn't had the damage that other people have had. And kind of there's that remorse that everybody else has it so much worse than me. One of the funny things was, as we're going along, all of a sudden the post office announces, well, we're going to start mail service tomorrow. And guess what? We had over 100 people in wanting a mailbox, and we didn't have mailboxes. But at that time, we were getting like daily deliveries from Ace Hardware. And so we were able to react quickly and get mailboxes and try to get people so that they had a place to receive their mail now. You know, I think when we had the tornado, everybody downtown kind of had to work together in a new and different way and kind of be more unified at everything, just to get through all of this, because there was so much to get through and to learn. Probably the biggest thing I reflect on, I never want to do this again. It was just exhausting, totally exhausting to do all of that. But you just had to plow your way through it, you know. I probably did a lot more than I ever thought I could do, but you had to do it.
Community Center, Library, and Parks. Jane Timmerman is Director of Recreation and Leisure Services for the City of St. Peter. The Community Center and Library were destroyed in the storm, along with many other parks being terribly damaged. It took 4 years of planning and building before the current Community Center and Library opened. Jane was among the team who worked to keep numerous community programs operational during the transition.
But I do remember afterwards that all the department directors gathered at the city council chambers in the municipal building and kind of checked in to find out how everybody was, what impacted people, what we were going to have to do, what we're looking at, and how we were going to start cleaning up the mess. Where do we go now? I mean, it's a huge, huge thing, and it's hard to know where to start. So in planning for summer, I had an idea that Winnebago's not too far away. They're in Iowa. I wonder if they would loan us a vehicle for the summer. So I contacted them, and sure enough, they had a rec vehicle that they would send to us. We just had to drive down and pick it up and bring it back. And so for that summer, we loaded all our supplies into that vehicle and taught our summer staff how to drive it. And then they went around from park to park and basically did programs out of that vehicle, which was really very dear and pretty exciting, because our staff was definitely wanting to provide programs for the kids we all saw that as a very important thing during the summer that kids could look forward to. A lot of people walk through this community center. You know, it's provided a place for, people are proud of it, a place for people to access different programs. Community ed and recreation being together is very important. It's truly been a community center. What I noticed and felt was this is really hard, but we're not going to let it get us down. And also the spirit of just gratefulness and awe at the amount of people that were willing to come in and help. That was phenomenal to me. I'm proud of the way we all pulled together and cared for each other. I'm proud of what we've done. Love that we could work with the Schmidt Foundation to build this incredible library. And it has become such a focus spot, a central spot to the community. And the fact that it's connected to the community center is even better. So I'm proud that people were creative and thoughtful in the way they approached rebuilding. And I'm proud of Gustavus and our partnership with Gustavus and all the things that we did together and how we helped each other. And I just think it's amazing that we were able to do everything we did and come out smiling.
Representing Gustavus Adolphus College, Ken Westfall is now retired as Vice President for Finance at Gustavus, where he served for 28 years. At that time, the insurance claim for Gustavus was over $50 million for damages, one of the largest claims for damage from a natural disaster for any college or university in the United States of America. Under the leadership of the college president, Axel Stoyer, the college opened 3 weeks after the tornado. The following fall, the college welcomed the largest incoming class in college history.
You know, when you think about a tornado, you think about those Kansas twisters where it twists and moves and so on. And so for me, I was so surprised to see just destruction everywhere and never this point of, okay, it didn't hit this part of the campus. Initially, you know, I would use the word assessment. We were very much about assessment. First, you know, when will we have electricity? Do we have heat to all of our campus buildings, water and sewer? Telecom, you know, going back 20 years ago, there weren't much in the way of cell phones. So are we going to be able to have communications via our landline systems? Then followed by structural engineers going through all of the buildings and determining are they safe, whether it be an academic building, a residence hall, or other type of building, and can we occupy it? Does it need repairs? I remember calling the insurance company and feeling at the time that I was very poised and confident, and at a certain point in the conversation, the person on the other line says to me, "Mr. Westfall, please calm down." and I felt like saying, but I am calm. and so understanding that at that point in time, and moving forward, we were all in a state of shock, and every day that got a little better, but acknowledging that there were very important decisions that were being made, and they were being made by everyone that didn't have quite 100% of their normal faculties was a little ominous. Consistent with that tagline of rebuilding a greater Gustavus, we knew that we need to send a message to the region that yes, we are rebuilding, we're coming back stronger and better than ever before. And so this project in the campus center was one that we said let's move forward with quickly, and we did that. And our alumni came in droves, and that was so, I think, important for them to be part of seeing their beloved alma mater, but also helping at the same time. When we think about our community, you know, we're very much aware at the time that we were blessed with a number of resources. We had excellent insurance coverage, and we knew that every single homeowner, maybe business owner, wasn't equally blessed. So we were moving forward because we felt that for our business that's what we needed to do. But we are also very mindful that everyone didn't have those same resources. So I think for us, when our students returned and when they asked what could we do, and things were moving fairly well here at Gustavus, that certainly opened up an outreach that they were helping neighbors rake their yards. They were helpful with farmers walking their fields, clearing debris so that they could do their spring planting.
Kay Osborne served as a pastoral associate for 25 years at the Church of St. Peter. For 2.5 years following the tornado, the church was able to resume classes at John Ireland School, while the congregation shared space at the First Lutheran Church. The sign out front is fondly remembered, saying, First Lutheran Catholic Church.
I have never seen such damage. When you think you have a strong structure, you look at red brick, and that's what the building was red brick, the small red brick. It never occurred to me how it was built, but as very clearly we saw, it was literally 3 red bricks, and that was the wall. There was no structure, there was no steel, there was nothing to hold it together. The only thing that held together was the roof, was like a 22-foot truss that went across, and it was a big one that went up to the top. And they could tell that the roof had been lifted and torqued a bit and sat back down, but it was still there. But all the windows were gone, and everything around the windows was blown out. So the damage in the church was monumental. The first Monday morning, I came up to First Lutheran from down below the hill and met with Pastor Mark Solis. And I just asked if we could please be with them in their building. Could we work on things for Holy Week? And we have nothing to bring except ourselves. I said, you have the building, you have everything, you have the heat, the lights, everything. And he says, come on, let's sit down and talk. And the insurance company definitely wanted to restore the place. And so we ended up in a lot of negotiations and a lot of talks and engineers and structural engineers and all that kind of thing. And it was like, so what if we rebuilt the church? We still don't have any parking, and we still need a bigger church. It gives you a different perspective about what really matters and what do we really want people to remember, and how can we meet a need for the people when they walk through the door. You know, because, you know, in the scheme of things, you're helping them to pray. You're reminding them that God is still here, God is still with us. And that was always our goal. And the biggest thing that lingers for me is just the appreciation of life. And it's very short. And treasure what you have. You know, and we're all called to be faithful. And no matter what happens, God's got a plan. Might not be our plan, but God's got a plan. You know, and I think that was the hardest thing, to believe that God would take care of us. You know, even with the decisions that had to be made and all of this, it was like, well, you know, we're all kind of out of our league here, but we kind of believe that God is leading us. So that was a strong trust, and it was a strong thing that Father Harry, like I said, his comment always was, what do you think God wants us to do? And I said one day to him, I said, I think he wants us to take a vacation. Let us go forth on the road that has brought us to where we are, from Philippians. So, pretty much been our mantra.
For the St. Peter Public Schools, Chris Sandborg currently teaches 5th and 6th grade physical education and health at St. Peter Middle School. But in 1998, Chris was a senior at St. Peter High School. The storm caused considerable damage to the high school. The district was eager to get students back to school, and in 4 days, Superintendent Gil Carlson and high school principal Jeff Olson reworked a master class schedule. Classes resumed about a week after the storm. High school students and elementary students each attended half days at North Intermediate School.
You know, we at the time thought, wow, cool, we only have half a day of school, you know, and we get to sleep in and we get to, go to school in the afternoon and these little kids are going to have the morning to have their classes, until you get there and realize what physical space you're in, sitting in small desks, the lunchroom, having mobile trailers out back that were your offices, just a really unique layout to finish that. Athletes, practices couldn't be held on our track and field, so we bussed over to Mankato to do those practices. Everything was just kind of thrown into a whirlwind of how to finish out that school year, but it happened. The main thing, it wasn't difficult to get us to come together, to get us to show up to be to school. Everybody really needed to sort of lean on one another at that point in time to finish out your school year. Attending school was your way to debrief almost, and to get through what was continuing to still happen in our community. Just because we went back to school didn't mean that everything was back to normal. But we had to be seniors and juniors and kids as much as we could at that time, because I think that's what allowed us to make our way through this experience as a community. With what was happening and transpiring, everybody was pushed to probably their max of being creative and sort of still continuing with a curriculum that was built for us to get before we left as seniors, but also allowing us the opportunity to sort of grieve, if that's what we were doing, or to celebrate that we were all still here and people's families were okay, to get through this time. We all just came together. I feel like a lot of times you naturally have divisions and groupings of students. It was the class of '98, and it was one group of people, and we really sought out each other. I feel like there was, if anything, there was a uniting of everybody, because you knew that everyone had a story, everyone was affected, and that there hopefully in a lot of people's experiences won't have to be another story that comes out like this in our community. People go out of their way in this community to make your experience one that is one you'll remember, that we embrace each other, we have strength in this community, and I don't think that will ever go away based on our experience of March 29th. And I really feel like we believe in one another, we're a supportive community, and we accept the differences that are in our community, because we understand that makes us whole.
From the City of St. Peter, Todd Prafke is the City Administrator for the City of St. Peter. Todd was on the job for about 4 months when that tornado hit. He feels there was value in being new to the job in a time because he wasn't rooted yet in the way things had already been done.
There's not a person in St. Peter at that time who was not impacted by the tornado. We could go down the list. There are dozens of things that are different from the time of the tornado. And so it's community center, it's roads, it's sidewalks, it's electric lines, it's the opportunity to have multiple service providers for telephony and internet and cable television or video, and all those things that came as a result of this that really put us in a position to be able to do some of these things. Again, going back to that maybe before we thought we couldn't do, but now we didn't know what we couldn't do, and so we just did it and made it happen. I can go down the list of all the things that have been improved, all the physical assets that have been improved, but really the thing that's probably most improved is that ability to work as a community, building those good habits with our partners and how we all interact, and again, how that makes our community all that much stronger than we were before, and certainly many other communities that I see within Minnesota. I think the tornado was that time where we went from just being a community that just kept going to being a community that decided to invest in community. And again, I think that's a really important change in mindset that really continues to propel us forward today as a community. We had volunteers from all over, And I wish I had the list. I'd send out probably 20 or 30,000 letters to people that came to help us. This is, and I know I say this at other meetings, but this is Minnesota, and there is something special here about helping your neighbor, and the significance of that, and what that means, and paying it back or paying it forward or whatever you do in that cycle. And we were such a beneficiary of that, and I just can't thank people enough who came to help us. So many people. I think the legacy of the tornado really is that investment and that thing that people have done to really make themselves part of the community. That investment in partnerships is significant and has really helped propel us now into the future, and will continue to do so. I think it's also, more importantly, about that strength of community and pulling ourselves up, and you know how it gets said, it's not how you get knocked down, right? It's how you get back up. And I think we're widely seen as being that community that knows how to get back up. And I'm really proud of that. And it impacts me in lots of ways. And how people love the community, you know? And so how cool is that? That's what we look for. That's why we live in communities. And I think so important, and I think people recognize that in us when they see us other places or they come to our community, and so that's really cool.
I'd like to thank all of the individuals who consented to be interviewed, and I think many of them are with us in the front rows here. Would you please stand and be recognized by your fellow St. Peterites? The St. Peter tornado affected the whole community, and the rebuilding was done with leadership and the hard work of this community. To honor this as we close, I'd like would you bring the house lights up, please? Thank you very much. I'd like you, where you are sitting, if you are able, please stand if your residence or vehicle was damaged in the storm. And when you stand, please remain standing. If your house or vehicle, holy mackerel. Stand if your place of employment was damaged in the storm. Stand if you helped a neighbor, friends, or a stranger clean up or rebuild. And please stand if at any time over the last 20 years you have felt pride and spirit in the St. Peter community. Thank you all for being a model to the state of Minnesota and to the United States of America about how a community can pull together and help each other and rebuild to be an even stronger place.